We are just weeks away from the version 1.0 release of Escape from Tarkov, and that drops on the 15th of November. But even as that date approaches, there are strong reasons to believe that the PVE mode will not arrive as a truly finished product. In this video, we'll walk through the core issues: economy, AI, mod support, endgame, and more. And that's coming from me, someone who has spent 1,500 hours playing Escape from Tarkov's PVE mode. And yes, it's possible some of these will be addressed in the patch notes. We don't have full access yet, so we'll flag that uncertainty as we go. One of the biggest structural problems the economy in Tarkov has always been heavily set up around PvP driven mechanics. There are regular wipes, loot rushes, strong demand for meta items and so on, but when you try to apply that to the same economy in PvE, where player versus environment plays a larger role, several issues crop up. Because the economy is still predicated on the PvP model, inflation tends to set in, loot becomes plentiful, extraction rates improve because you're playing against AI, you can learn them much easier than player prediction and understanding how players are going to move. Players then accumulate gear, prices go up in terms of the high-end gear, which is the stuff that you actually specifically want at the high end of Tarkov. That means that most items you find in raids gradually become either pointless to pick up if they are not the super meta gear, and unless they're specifically needed for barter trades, hideout upgrades, or crafting. In other words, there's less inherent value in just finding loot for the sake of looting and developing your character, selling things off, because 95% of the stuff you find in your raids is not worth anything. And so when you're coming into an extraction shooter, extracting with the loot is supposed to be the main thing. Whereas I feel like the direction that PvE is in right now, that just isn't really the case, and it's only specific things that you're even bothering to pick up. Now, another change that did happen along the PvE journey of where we are right now is that found in raid was required on all hideout upgrades, meaning that you have to find all of the items for your hideout in your raids in order to actually upgrade the hideout, which means that you can no longer buy them off of the flea, meaning that all of those items that were once valuable and were worth actually picking up are no longer worth anything. And in fact, the majority of you, once you've actually got past the hideout, become even less worth because now you can't even sell them off. They become complete irrelevancy where no one is actually picking them up, whereas before they definitely were. When loot loses value, players ultimately feel like the loop is go in, loot, extract, sell, or stash it, rather than go in, hunt meaningful loot, feel rewarded, and then you actually get some excitement from getting good drops, or something that you need, or something that you can find and sell to someone else, which is very valuable to them, even if it isn't necessarily a valuable trade that you can do to the traders. So this sort of thing definitely weakens how the actual reward loop is within the game, and I think that that is really important when you're predicating a game upon being a extraction shooter where you are going in and trying to essentially get that money, get those upgrades, and be able to upgrade your own character by using all of the money that you may have actually made within the game mode itself. And since this is very, very weak in terms of how it works right now, it doesn't feel so good. But why does that mean that PvE mode isn't finished? Because the economy logic hasn't been fundamentally redesigned to remove or adjust the PvP triggered inflation dynamics. The PvE mode will launch with an economy that doesn't feel fully refined for its purpose. Loot will feel fungible and less exciting, and players who prefer the looting loop might feel like the chase is just missing. You don't feel that big reward when you get a Bitcoin because you don't really spend the money on anything. You're just kind of accumulating your money for not really any real reward. Now, there are a few things that could be done and could come in with the update of 1.0, and I wanted to go over these because these are things that I think are valuable for some people to have a think about, and obviously you guys let me know. But the first thing is introducing dynamic item syncs. Now, special uses for essentially found in raid items beyond just barter or selling them. Either unique hideout modules, so something that may not pose anything really too amazing, and we've seen that even like cosmetic things like posters go for millions of rubles on PvE because they're something new and something that you can customize your hideout with. A similar sort of thing where you have to collect X amount of stuff in order to be able to create something that is hideout specific and doesn't really affect the gameplay might be something that is really useful for the PvE mode, where, you know, you could have it on PvP at the exact same time, but PvE will make a better use of this and it will become somewhere where all of the supply of the items goes into, and so picking up those items becomes rewarding again, even if it doesn't necessarily inherently give you a huge money boost or anything like that. It's something that you will do a long time and become a prestigious thing to have collected. You can also do the same thing with cosmetics, that maybe you could create some cosmetics that require certain items that are typically not valuable towards later stages of the wipe in PvP, for example, and in just general content after a few months of the PvE being released. I think this could be really, really big to try and get rid of some of the excess rubles that everyone is accumulating, as well as actually being able to give us something new and something exciting to grind for that is a bit different to the typical end game, whereby you are just going in, looting, selling things and not spending your rubles. One other potential option is to introduce periodic resets or decay mechanics for surplus loot if you have too much of it, for example, so that players can't just accumulate endlessly and inflate the market. Now, this is something that I don't necessarily 100% agree with, but it is a potential solution whereby certain items would become unusable or they degrade over time, meaning that you have to go and get them again. And so yeah, we don't want it to become a grind fest where you're constantly having to keep on grinding the same items to get them back to then hopefully they don't degrade or whatever, but it gives an incentive to list it and to get it or whatever, and as they go out of the game, the supply decreases, and so it just decreases the overall supply of some of these items. So I think it could potentially be a way to kind of fix it, but it would be more of a band-aid fix rather than trying to come up with an intuitive solution that really helps out the mode itself. Now, we've also seen in the economy, whether that be PvP or PvE, that there is limited access to certain items on the flea. I also think that this could be a way of trying to help improve the grinding and the actual, not necessarily grinding because it won't feel too bad, it's just more of like the incentive to go and find the best gear, because a lot of it eventually you can just buy off of the flea. Even some of the kind of high-end gear is available on the flea, albeit right now, because of the latest softcore changes that are currently in the game before 1.0 release, you can buy everything. What I'm saying here is that there should maybe be some more restrictions or something to stop the just massive amounts of things being added into the game on the flea, or you could just disable the flea market on PvE. Maybe this is a potential solution so that everything that you need, you have to find yourself, almost like a hardcore style, but once again, is this going to detract away from the general player base who are playing the game? I don't quite know. BSG could even test out for a little bit, just as a little test, and then maybe give us like a couple of weeks of nothing being able to be sold on the flea or something like that. And also, maybe they could even implement some form of loot bracket system for PvE mode specifically that kind of either caps out some of the end game content rewards so you can't sell them for any more than what they actually should be, and also just, you know, enabling maybe some increase in sale value of some of the lower tier items to traders, for example, so that it is still worth picking them up, because once again, lots of the just generic loot that you're finding, you know, UV filament lamps going for literally nothing on the flea market, and they sell for even less to traders, making it less incentivizing to pick them up, even more so than it already is. And I think that, yeah, there's definitely some needs for the PvE economy to have some sort of differentiation between the PvP one if they want the game mode to be a fully finished product that people will play for years and years and years. Another major pillar, the NPCs, scavs, AI PMCs, bosses, still need a lot of work to be fully dynamic and engaging in PvE-centric environment. Many players feel the AI tends to follow predictable patterns, lacks variation, and doesn't scale up well to the actual character level that you are. One of the most interesting examples is with the modding community. The Sane mod for SBT Tarkov replaces large portions of the AI combat logic and behavior tree to make bots act much more like human players. Sane replaces combat logic. Bots can run for cover, heal, react to sound, use different personalities. So they have Giga Chad, they've got Rat, they've got Timmy, and they act in different ways based on what they have as a personality. So they can either play super passively, hiding. They've got people that will just run in and they'll be generally worse than other AI. And then we've also got the ones that are like fully kitted out and they've got lots of very good gear items that aren't actually available in the standard vanilla version of PvE, and they can also share information in their squad, allowing them to adapt to different situations as they go through the actual game itself. The existence of Sane highlights a gap that if modders feel the need to overhaul the AI to make it compelling and people prefer this, then maybe vanilla AI isn't hitting the ideal benchmark. And I certainly think that this is something that people should be looking at as a true example of what could be done. And whilst you might not agree with everything, there is definitely a plausible way of implementing something similar that could generally improve the overall AI experience that makes it feel more fun. In PvE mode, where player interaction may be reduced, obviously having fewer or no human opponents. I mean, the only way to get a human opponent is by joining up with them and then playing against them if you wanted to do some interesting content against each other. The AI has to carry the experience. If the AI doesn't scale or behave convincingly, the endgame kind of feels flat, because at the end of the day, once you've done a lot of the tasks, once you've been able to accumulate the rubles to buy some of the better gear, the AI are generally just worse because you have top tier gear. You are able to deal with the AI easier than when you very first started the game, which doesn't seem quite right to me, because if you have gone to the end game, you have leveled up your character, you have everything, you are going to be at an advantage over the AI, which the AI aren't going to scale with you. They are not going to always be at the same level of you. They are not going to be slightly harder as you level up. This sort of thing really kind of makes the game a complete breeze as soon as you start to get to that level. And whilst that might not be the core thing for you right now, if you play PvE, if you haven't leveled up to the point where you have like the top tier gear, then maybe it's not an issue for you right now, but it definitely will be as time moves on. The AI behavior is foundational to PvE. It is the E in PvE. Without dynamic, interesting bots, the loop becomes repetitive, it becomes meta predictable, where the top tier stuff that is in PvP is the only things people use in PvE, and whilst you can say you can use anything in PvE, it's up to you, it still kind of removes some of the challenge. And unless the 1.0 update brings major improvements to AI, PvE will launch with a weaker living world feel. And so I think that that is the issue that I'm kind of finding when I have ground out to the higher levels, and the only way I can kind of get that feeling back of what it was at the beginning is to reset to the beginning again. Now, some solutions that we could come up with for this is introduce AI scaling that ties to the player progression and gear. As players get stronger, bots get smarter or tougher. They have better tactics, better gear, higher aggression. You could provide built-in AI behavior presets, easy, medium, and hard, and these being easy to differentiate between what type of AI you actually can come across. And even having a community custom mode with parameters, like, for example, adding in an event where all AI have reduced reaction time, or they have more accuracy, or they have better squad coordination, almost like a race to be able to complete the game, where everyone can have it at a certain time, an event goes on, and so they add an extra character slot, which is like an event only mode, which you start again and you're racing against all of the other PvE players to complete the game. And whilst, you know, you may not want to do that, it is definitely potentially something that a lot of people might want to do as like a refreshing thing, and something as a bit of a challenge where you want to beat your mates, even if you are just trying to race against your friends and you're not really considering the top tier sweats who are spending 8 to 10 hours a day playing the game mode. You can even add randomized behavior event, for example, ambushes. You could add scav raids, or, you know, where you're seeing lots of scavs all enter into a map, like a random event where lots more scavs enter into the map that you maybe unlock, and you can add it into your raids. You can toggle it on or you can toggle it off, where maybe 1 in every 20 raids, a huge scav horde decides to descend upon one specific map. You can add in boss patrols where they move out of the areas where maybe they are typically found. So for Caban, he can move outside of his standard area where he's going to try and patrol and hunt you down, for example. So each raid feels different, even if the core game is still the exact same. It just adds variety, and I think variety is something that PvE is lacking right now when it comes to the actual combat systems and the AI behavior that we have. You can also have things like intelligent extraction. For the AI PMCs, they find a very valuable thing and they try and leave as quickly as possible, like a real player would. And so they give you maybe a timer or scramble you into going to that extract, following them down, tracking them down, whilst they're doing like a delayed retreat fight. That's just something that maybe once again can be taken from examples like Sane and some of the other SPT mods that have already been developed by other people and could quite easily, from my understanding, be added in with mod support. And talking about mod support, let's delve into the topic. As many in the community already know, one of the big hopes around 1.0, as stated previously in one of the interviews, that mod support would be coming with Tarkov PVE 1.0 release. The developers Battlestate Games obviously have said it in an interview that full mod support will be available, but I remain skeptical as to how much there will be at launch and how it will interact with the shared market and flee system. On one hand, games like The Elder Scrolls, Skyrim or Baldur's Gate via community modding show how mod support can extend the lifespan of a game drastically by enabling new types of play, new content, new ways to engage the exact same content in a variety of different fun and exciting new ways that engage someone that has already kind of ground out the game or wants to play in a specific play style or way that the game, just as a core vanilla game, doesn't actually provide. On the other hand, in Tarkov, there is the shared market and there is the shared flee system. So if mods allow changes that affect loot or the economy or item valuations, then I think it's only fair that BSG will have to verify and approve them. Otherwise, you risk market manipulation where people are boosting up loot spawns, for example, and making them crazy. And so they can just farm endless amounts of bitcoins every single raid, getting 10, 20, 30 bitcoins in a raid or something like that. So obviously there has to be some restrictions as to what type of mods are allowed into the game, if they keep that if you use mods that people can use the flee. I think the kind of argument against that is that, well, why not just allow that if you use any mod that you are not allowed to access the flee unless they are specifically verified, at which point, you know, if BSG have said that it doesn't impact the loot, perfect, you can use the flee as normal, just with a different game mode type, for example. And so that, I think, would be an amazing introduction, something that allows you to basically go in and play the game how you want. You could make so many different, fun, exciting games that maybe aren't even good for your stash value, for example, where you're playing against hordes of zombies like we had with the zombie event, or maybe you could even bring back some of the old events that were already in the game, and so you want to play them at Christmas time, you want to play the Halloween event from last year, perfect, you can do that. You want to play with some weird hardcore setup that you can only use certain things, or you have to play a gun game mode that you can essentially only upgrade to a new weapon once you've done certain tasks with a weapon, perfect, you can do that with the mods. I think many players already use the SPT mods to experience a more refined AI or single player environment, but if standard PvE mode allows access to the mod support, then I think this would be a massive thing for people wanting to jump in and experience new things and keep the game mode fresh. I actually think this is probably the biggest thing that PvE could do to really enhance the experience of the people who play their game. The question, will 1.0 launch with official mod support, however, for multiplayer or shared market use, or will mod support be limited to offline single player private servers? If the latter, the official PvE mode still lacks full mod flexibility, and I'm really hoping that they do actually follow through on what they potentially said about having mod support. This could be one of the biggest game changers for PvE players, and I am super excited for any potential, even small changes that mods could add in if they do follow through with this. Unless mod support and market interaction are safe and balanced from day one, you're going into 1.0 with potential grey zones. Either you restrict mods, which reduces player freedoms, or you allow them and risk instability and exploitation that means finished mod market integration is unlikely at launch. And considering we've never had any testing with mods prior to the release of 1.0, I could only hope that most things aren't broken, but that's just hoping. And so at launch, offer a separate PvE branch mode where mods are allowed, but market and fleet access is disabled. So modded loot cannot be touched by the shared economy. Introduce official mod verification tools. You could provide clear segregation between vanilla and official multiplayer, and then having a market access by modded/unofficial server, like where no market access is allowed, or making it transparent that you are playing on the unofficial market, for example. In the long term, enable community modding with sandboxed economy instances so that players can experiment without affecting the main economy, I think is only a plus side. It's then up to the player what they want to play. And when you're playing a single player reliant game mode where you are just playing against the AI, if you don't find value in what the AI are like, then you're not going to play that single player game anymore. And I think if you can change how they are to suit you, that only makes your player experience even better. And I'm super excited that this is potentially something that could be coming when 1.0 releases. However, I do think that it would take many months, if not years, to be able to get to the point where fully fleshed out mods are fully released in a good state, considering, you know, we would have to go from borderline zero and we have no idea what the mod support may even be like in the game in the first place. So next up, what happens when you are now geared? You've got the hang of the maps and the mechanics, the main grind is done, you've got Kappa, you've got Lightkeeper. In PvP mode, the endgame is often about player interaction, hunting other players, high stakes raids, competitive meta. But in PvE, if bots don't scale and the loot becomes static, endgame engagement just basically drops off a cliff. There's not a huge amount for you to do other than farm rubles for the sake of farming rubles, add more stuff to your stash, get a huge amount of graphics cards, whatever it is. It's just kind of dead at the end. In PvP-centric Tarkov, endgame can be chasing high-tier gear, you go in after those big fights where you're just running directly at everyone that you see, you know, stash and legacy progression, going for prestiges, but that inherently involves other players. If PvE is independent of that, then the challenge has to come from other sources. If AI doesn't scale with player level and gear, then ironically raids may get easier over time, like I said earlier, because you get stronger while the AI remains the same, making the endgame feel lackluster to say the least, and almost like you've got to that point where you've fully geared your character and you don't get to use it because everything's just easier. Without meaningful endgame activities beyond grind for a said achievement or repeat tasks or loot runs, players will feel like they are just repeating what they've already done for the whole point of getting to the end game where they've got all of the gear that they've been wanting that whole time. Replayability requires both new challenges and new goals, whether unique raid types, special events, high risk, high reward content, dynamic AI behavior. You get the gist. Lots of things could be added in that would give us that endgame feel, but at the release of 1.0, I don't think we're going to see that, considering we've had no testing or even implementation of anything of that nature beforehand. Because the foundation of endgame in PvE hasn't yet been transparently laid out. It's unlikely 1.0 will launch with a fully fleshed out endgame loop for PvE. That means once early access players finish the initial grind, the mode may feel stagnant. Now, some potential solutions are introducing tiered raid difficulties, i.e. Nightmare, Insane, Grandmaster, where AI behavior, loot value and extraction conditions scaled based on the behavior that you've added in. So you reach the end game, at which point you can make it harder for yourself, or you can add in increased spawns of AI. And so that could be something that they could quite easily do, a tick box allowing you, like you can do with custom instances where you can increase the difficulty of the AI that you're actually playing against. It's just in the standard PvE game mode that's not actually available. It's only in the custom kind of games that you can play with friends or on your own, where it's not actually a finished product anyway, because often there aren't that many spawns of AI in those custom lobbies that you can play on Tarkov. You could also add randomized rotating event raids, so map modifiers, special objectives, escort, timed extractions, boss rushing, loot modifiers, loads of different things that could modify how the game actually plays in the actual game itself without any mods. So we're not talking about mods here, but just general endgame activities that could be added in as a full release, kind of full fleshed out endgame system that you can play different types of ways at the end once you've completed everything and you feel, I'm ready now to do something different to what I've already done when I've been tasking and raiding and gathering my gear. What can I now use that for? Well, here you go. Here is that endgame content. That's not the case right now. Now it's just, well, I've got all the gear, got all the money, now I have nothing to spend it on. You can even bring in progression beyond gear. Legacy stash upgrades, so you can upgrade after you've completed all of the quest lines. You can bring in cosmetics, you can bring in hideout prestige levels where you can upgrade your hideout again, so you can start back at level 1 on your hideout upgrade. So you could reset all of your hideout to the very bog standard in reward for getting something else. And so you go back to having your hideout at level 0 where you have to find everything again, and you get maybe some slight bonuses to each one of the upgrade stations that you have in your hideout. I think that would be nice. It's only a small suggestion, but once again, loads of small things can add up to a pretty big, fun experience in the end. Implement raid fatigue or decay, so that rerunning the same map repeatedly gives diminished rewards but a small chance of rare loot to keep players coming back. You could even consider co-op challenges for PvE mode. If you allow 2 to 4 players co-op, add unique objectives that require teamwork even versus AI, so that replayability is enhanced and it gets the community together. There's so many different things that I think could be very, very useful for people, and it just hasn't been yet even tested, let alone added into the game. And I feel like lots of other PvE related games have these sorts of features that are already there. I'm not dragging these from the depths of absolutely nowhere. These are all ideas that have already been added to lots of successful single player games that have been able to stand the test of time. And so far, I'm not really seeing a whole lot of standing the test of time of PvE mode right now. And whilst yes, it's pretty fresh and new, so lots of people who do play the game, and most of them being quite casual players, and maybe even you are a casual player, you've probably not got to the full endgame point, or you haven't been able to fully complete PvE mode yet. But that's a yet, and when you do, you'll find that, what do I do now? And that is the core issue of, I think, why it isn't a fully rounded game. And yeah, there are a couple of other valuable critiques that I want to go over, and we'll just whistle over those now. So obviously Tarkov PvP has long used wipes to refresh the economy and create urgency. If PvE mode simply inherits this same model, except it doesn't actually allow any resets, it doesn't force you to reset your account or has no systems in place that allow you to reset or have some sort of freshness to the game, then I think that is an issue, because a finished PvE mode might need some sort of different progression cadence where there is something that allows you to get the game back to a refreshed state, where you feel like there's new stuff to do or you have a new goal in mind. And so defining a separate wipe model for PvE, maybe having milestone based resets where you don't have to, but they are there in case you want to, whereby maybe you get to level 50 and you can reset and you can get some form of small reward. Nothing major, nothing game breaking, nothing completely revolutionary, but it just gives you a way of feeling like the game has thought about the end game and something that you can do after you've got to the point of completing most things in the game. I feel like that's how generally most games appeal to people, or have those in-game stuff. And if you have the endgame stuff, then you don't even need to reset your actual character to be able to get new and exciting content. It's just there added in as standard. So that's something that I think could be interesting. Another thing is introducing map variation systems. So, maybe, for example, in certain maps that you end up with having new extract points coming in that are dynamic. A ship comes down or something and it crashes into the shore, and you can escape on that as like a small event or something along those lines. So on Lighthouse, for example, a ship comes crashing into the beach and you can go on the ship and you have to take out this mini boss, and once you've done that you can extract using the ship. That it could be a really exciting new way to play the game, but nothing so far. And obviously these would require some significant changes and updates and time to develop such systems. I just think that these sorts of things are things to be kept in mind for after 1.0 releases. And yeah, at the moment I'm definitely feeling that fatigue of playing the same thing over and over and over again and having not a lot of variety. And so that is the thing that I really want you guys to take out of this game and have the excitement of having when you do get to that endgame state, which I've been at for many months, if not a year, because of how much I play. And you guys will get there too, to the same point. It just might take a lot longer because you play 5 times less than me, 6 times less than me. So maybe you're not there yet, but I feel like most people will have these issues at the end. And so I really want to talk about them, tell you why, and highlight some potential things that BSG could do to make our game even better. That's where all of these videos come from, is because I love the game. I want the game to be as good as possible, and that is simply what I'm hoping for. However, given what I've seen so far, I doubt lots of these things will come into the finished version of 1.0, and I'm skeptical that the PvE mode is going to have that endgame content that we really do need. But maybe I'll be proved wrong, and I will love to be proved wrong. I just don't think that Tarkov PVE mode 1.0 release is truly a finished game. There are so many issues that need to be addressed, so many more things to be added that will make it into that fully fleshed out idea of what an extraction shooter should be. And whilst it has done an amazing job taking off some great updates that we've seen over PVE mode, it just doesn't quite hit right at the end game. And I think that is where we're lacking at this current moment in time on PvE mode, and hopefully mods will change that, will add in new features, and will make the game a much better place to be in once you do reach that stage. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you're thinking about buying PvE mode, have a think about some of these things. Maybe hold off until the release of 1.0 and see what you're thinking after then. But with that being said, I will see you in the next video. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you there. Goodbye.